Poitras to Providence, the power rankings, and a power play unit shakeup.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, November 12th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet, that is. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes, at Ian C. McLaren. Also, most recently on Blue Sky, as a lot of people are jumping over there. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for almost 20 years now. Was a full-time hockey news editor at The Score and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. And today on the podcast, we are going to discuss, well, let's start with some surprising news yesterday that may or may not have long-term implications on this roster, and that is the assignment of Matt Poitras down to Providence. This was announced on Monday afternoon after practice had been completed, and it was apparent that Poitras was going to be a healthy scratch for tonight's game against the St. Louis Blues, with Morgan Geekie, for some reason, being placed on the top line on his off wing after being scratched recently and after a very lackluster start to the season in his own right. Poitras sent down to Providence. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. Neither has been confirmed by the Bruins, but one, the Providence Bruins don't play till Friday, so he's either going to go down there, get some practice time this week, and jump in with big minutes, top power play, deployment, etc., a top line center role with the AHL club over the weekend, or he's being sent down to save some cap space while being scratched. If you're not going to play him, the idea is you just paper him to the AHL and save towards the cap over the next few days. Now, is that wise? Well, perhaps, because every dollar that you're saving against the cap can be used later on closer to the trade deadline. So there is some wisdom to that, if indeed that is what they're doing. But we don't know exactly that's the case. So it's a bit of a head scratcher at the moment, because however you look at it, the reality is the Bruins are better with Matt Poitras in the lineup. He has been very good this season, especially at 5-on-5, where the majority of the game has been played. His daily cap hit is $4,531. So you send him down, say he doesn't play on this road trip in St. Louis and Dallas, you're saving $9,000, perhaps $13,000 against the cap that you can use later on in the season. Is it worth it? Who knows? Would it be better for him to accompany the team on the road trip for the bonding experience? Is it better for him to practice in Providence this week? Is it better for him to be in the NHL lineup? At the end of the day, probably. The Bruins are not as good of a team without him, even with his learning and growing experience that he still needs. Yes, he can be pushed off the puck too easily. He's gotten rocked a couple times this season. He's only 20 years old. It's not the worst thing in the world for Matt Poitras to get some seasoning at the AHL level. I've compared him in the past to David Krejci. Krejci, at this age, did have extended run at the AHL level. So it could be beneficial for him now and down the line. But at the same time, this Bruins team is not very good right now. They have serious puck possession and offensive deficiencies. And Matt Poitras still helps turn the needle in Boston's direction, even if he gets rocked every now and again, even if he still has some learning to do to play NHL center big minutes. So maybe he goes down to Providence and gets an extended run with the baby Bruins. And hey, maybe he develops some chemistry with Fabian Lysell and they become the next Boston Bruins power couple now that Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman have been separated. And that could benefit them moving forward. Or maybe he is just being sent down for cap reasons and will be back with the Bruins sooner than later. The baby Bruins just came off a 3-game weekend in which they won all 3 games. They have another 3-game weekend coming up this weekend, playing Cleveland twice, as well as the team in Hartford. So maybe he'll get a few games in there after not playing for the Bruins this week, or he'll be back up for their next home game, which is on Saturday, another game against the Blues, who this team will play tonight. So it's a bit confusing, a bit of a head scratcher. Not the worst thing. Maybe the Bruins just want to get their young, up-and-coming center away from the mess that kind of is this team right now. Head coach Jim Montgomery doesn't have answers. Another line blending practice yesterday. I mentioned Geeky on the top line. There's a shakeup on the power play units, which we'll discuss later on in the show. Maybe they just want to get him under the more solid tutelage of head coach Ryan Mugenel down in the AHL. There's a lot of potential factors here, but at the end of the day, the Bruins need a guy like Matt Poitras to be firing on all cylinders in order to be successful, and hopefully he is back sooner than later. If it were not for the Andrew Peeke injury, perhaps the same thing would be happening with Mason Lohrei, but they only have 6 healthy defensemen on the roster at the moment, and as such, they kind of need Lohrei maybe more than they need Poitras at the moment. But right now, with Poitras sent down, again, don't forget he's waiver exempt. He, along with John Beecher, are the only forwards who are waiver exempt. Lohrei is waiver exempt. So once they have him down there, they only have 12 healthy forwards. They will have 6 healthy defensemen and the 2 goalies. So basically carrying the minimum on the roster. Will they call somebody up? Or will, again, Poitras just be a paper transaction and he'll come back up for the game against the Stars on Thursday? We'll have to wait and see. Max Jones did play pretty well for Providence over the weekend. Maybe he comes back up in the time being. But all that to say, keep it locked through Locked On Boston Bruins. Follow the YouTube account. I posted a quick immediate reaction video to this news yesterday, and we'll, of course, keep you up to date on all things black and gold here on the podcast feed as well as on the YouTube feed. So make sure you're subscribed in each place. So that's the Poitras news. We will discuss the Atlantic Division power rankings and preview tonight's game against the St. Louis Blues here as the podcast continues. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Select Quote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You can get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Again, go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. At SelectQuote, they shop and you save. Tackle this season's NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, as well as the NHL, NBA, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Tuesdays on Locked On Boston Bruins mean a quick check of the Atlantic Division power rankings and where the Bruins rank this week. It's a bit deceiving if you just look at the point standings. Right now, the Bruins sit third in terms of total points earned so far in the Atlantic with 16 through 16 games. But as we discuss each and every week, the more important thing to look at is point percentage. That is the percent of points earned versus total points possible. So the Bruins have played 16 games. That means they have 32 points that they've been able to compete for so far this season. They've earned only 16, so that puts them at a point percentage of 500, which is middle of the pack in the Atlantic at the moment. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up. The last place, Montreal Canadiens. Always love to see the Canadiens down in last place. They've played 16 games. They've earned 12 points for a 37.5 point percentage. They are coming off a win yesterday over the Buffalo Sabres. A bit of a shootout there, a 7-5, I believe the final score was. And it seems as though Patrick Laine may be coming back sooner than expected. He could be here at the end of the month. So that will obviously improve Montreal's overall team offense. But still, this is a rebuilding club with a lot of young pieces. I don't expect them to get much higher than, well, maybe the bottom three here in the Atlantic Division this season. In seventh place this week, the Detroit Red Wings. They have a point percentage of .464, 13 points through 14 games. Again, they are 3 points behind our Bruins, but they do have 2 games in hand. Detroit also has a better goal differential than Boston at -9. So even though the Bruins are at 500, they're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination here. The Buffalo Sabres, they had that loss yesterday to the Canadiens. They dropped below 500. They have a point percentage of .469, but they do have a positive goal differential. They're at +2 at the moment, even after giving up 7 goals yesterday to the Canadiens. The Bruins are tied in point percentage with the Ottawa Senators at an even 500. But I'm giving Ottawa the edge here because they have a much better goal differential than our Bruins do. The Senators, they're 7-7, 14 points in 14 games, 2 points behind the Bruins with 2 games in hand, and their their goal differential is +4, whereas Boston's is -12, which is second worst in the Atlantic Division. So the Bruins I'm putting in 5th this week. You could argue that they could be in 6th behind the Sabres. If the Sabres had won yesterday, they still have a positive goal differential, whereas the Bruins have a lot of heavy lifting to do to get into the green here on the NHL.com standings. But they have a better point percentage, so I'll keep the Bruins in 5th for the time being. Top 3, no surprise. These teams are always strong. The Tampa Bay Lightning, although they're coming off a loss over the weekend. They have like the week off, which is weird. I don't know if it's their bye week or what, but they have a .536 point percentage, a +4 goal differential. That's your third place team at the moment. Toronto Maple Leafs have won 3 in a row. They're really rising. Despite the recent overtime loss to Boston, they did rebound with that shutout win over the Bruins last week. They're at .625 in terms of point percentage, +9, and they would be top team in the Atlantic were it not for the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, who are on a 7-game winning streak. They're 8-1-1 over their past 10 games. They lead the division in point percentage with .767. They're tied with the Leafs for regulation wins with 9. And they have the top goal differential in the Atlantic at +12. So if we're going by point percentage, the Bruins rank tied for 5th at the moment. But if we're going by goal differential, I'm giving the Senators the edge because the Bruins have a -12 goal differential. Only the Canadiens at -21 are worse in the Atlantic. In the Eastern Conference as a whole, the Bruins, only 3 teams are worse than them in terms of goal differential. The Philadelphia Flyers, who won last night. The Pittsburgh Penguins, who got tuned last night by the Dallas Stars. They're tied with Montreal at -21. The Bruins at the moment, like I said, are 3rd in the Atlantic in terms of points. So right now they're in a playoff spot. But if you look at point percentage in the Eastern Conference, they are a borderline playoff team at the moment. They are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th, tied with the Islanders and Senators in terms of point percentage. The Metro, pretty strong right now. Well, the top 3 teams are very strong, at least. Well, top 4, really. Carolina, New Jersey, they lead with 22 points, second only to the Panthers in the East. And then you have the Capitals, who are off to a surprising start, and the Rangers down in 4th. So those 4 teams look pretty strong. The bottom 4, not very. So it looks like it's shaping up to be an even 4-4 split between the Metro and Atlantic when it comes to playoff spots. But the Bruins look to be in a fight with the likes of the Senators, the Sabres, perhaps the Red Wings for that 4th and final spot. They'll have a chance to get back on track tonight against the St. Louis Blues, and that is a game we will preview here as the podcast continues. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. On Tuesdays, they have a Taco Tuesday promotion. Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. All you have to do is download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the PrizePicks app, use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. At PrizePicks, you can run your game. The Bruins vibes could go one of two ways tonight. They're playing the St. Louis Blues, so obviously a victory over the team that stole the 2019 Stanley Cup from us would go a long way. A loss to this team who's coming off a drubbing at the hands of the Washington Capitals, and things will get even more tense around this club. Jim Montgomery, you could argue he's already on the hot seat. He's already on thin ice, whichever analogy you want to use. If they lose tonight, that will only continue to magnify. The Bruins, of course, coming in off the loss over the weekend. They have won 3 of their past 5 games, however, but they're 4-5-1 over their past 10. The Blues, slightly worse. They're 4-6 over their past 10. Coming off 2 losses to Utah and Washington, although they did beat Tampa and Toronto in the preceding 2 games. Overall, they're 7-8, while our Bruins are 7-2. They are led in net, of course, by Jordan Binnington. I almost don't want to say his name, but we'll give him a bit of respect here. Joel Hofer is the backup, and he very well could get the start after Binnington had a woeful game over the weekend against the Washington Capitals, giving up 7 or 8 goals in that one. Hofer with a .903 save percentage. He has the best save percentage among all 4 possible goalies in this one. Korpisalo next at .900. Jeremy Swayman at .896. Binnington at .886. So it's possible we could see a Korpisalo Hofer start here as Swayman is coming off the loss to Ottawa, and the Bruins maybe will get back to more of a tandem here as Swayman tries to find that elite status that we all know and love. Over the past 5 games, the Blues are led in scoring by Jordan Kyrou. He's got 4 points, including 3 goals. Brad Marchand leads the way for this team with 3 goals, 5 points over the past 5. David Pastrnak with 4 assists, but we'd really like to see Pasta break out here with some goal scoring, which has been a bit dry as of late. He does have 6 goals in 16 games, which is not the level of production that we're used to, and he's got no goals since that October 26th game against the Maple Leafs. So that's 7-game goal drought that Pasta is mired in. They just can't afford to have that many games without goals from their best player. The Blues are led in scoring overall by Kyrou, who has 13 points through 15 games. Not a lot of standouts otherwise. Pavel Buchnevich with 9 points in 15 games. Robert Thomas, who's injured, 6 points in 7 games. On the back end, Philip Broberg, who's also injured, has 9 points through 12 games. So the Bruins are catching the Blues at a time where they're missing a couple of their more effective players. They really have to take advantage of that at the moment. St. Louis's power play is dead last in the NHL, ranked 32nd. Their penalty kill isn't much better at 23rd. Boston's numbers aren't that great either, though. They're 29th on the power play, 24th on the penalty kill. So hopefully they're able to take advantage of that special teams slight advantage that they have, even though both teams are pretty bad at the moment. And speaking of that, it looks as though the Bruins are going to make a change with their power play units. On Monday at practice, it was Hampus Lindholm who was mercifully guiding the top unit. He's been much more effective than Charlie McAvoy in that role, despite limited opportunities. And We talk about Jim Montgomery over tinkering with the lineup sometimes. This is a move that does make some sense here, and hopefully it's able to get that unit clicking. McAvoy down on the second unit with Mason Lohrei, Morgan Geekie getting a look there with Charlie Coyle and Justin Brazeau. The lines I should mention in practice, Geekie up on the top line with Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak. Geekie's been tremendously ineffective so far this season, yet somehow he's been given a promotion to the top line. 0 goals, 2 assists in 11 games. He's been recently scratched. So why not try him on the top line on his off wing? What could possibly go wrong there? Brad Marchand on the second line with Elias Lindholm, Justin Brazeau. You had Tyler Johnson, who had occupied that spot where Geekie's getting a look. He's now on the third line with Trent Frederick and Charlie Coyle. And then the fourth line, John Beecher, Mark Kostelik, and Cole Koepke. Hopefully they can find some of the magic they had early on this season. In terms of goals per game, both these offenses pretty inept. St. Louis ranks 25th at 2.53 goals per game. The Bruins are 26th at 2.5. Goals allowed, however, St. Louis has allowed 3.47 to rank 27th, and the Bruins are 22nd at 3.25 goals allowed. So this could really go either way tonight. The Bruins desperately need the win to get over 500 to ease some of the pressure that is consistently building. But this train really appears to be headed to coach replacement town if things continue with maybe one step forward, 2 steps back kind of scenario that the Bruins have found themselves in. Bruins, Blues tonight, an 8 p.m. Eastern start because it is in St. Louis. Again, hopefully they can come out and put their best skates forward in this game against the Blues and just really pile on after they had that big loss the other night against Washington. We'll be back with a fresh episode tomorrow to recap tonight's game, to bring you all the latest on the black and gold, of course. Please do check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast next. Steal and Flip will give you all the tips you need to get ahead of the competition. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here tomorrow on Locked On Boston Bruins. I'm done.